Before the dawn of time as we know it, before the first breath of mankind, before the first star was hung in the vast expanse of the universe, there was a realm beyond human comprehension, a place of perfection, beauty, and unshaken order. This was the kingdom of heaven, where divine beings, radiant and powerful, existed in perfect harmony under the authority of their Creator. Among them was one whose brilliance surpassed all others, a being of extraordinary splendor, wisdom, and might. His name was Lucifer. Lucifer, whose very name means light bringer or morning star, stood among the highest of the angelic hosts. He was not just another celestial being, but one of great significance, adorned with beauty beyond measure and endowed with an intellect that shone like the stars. He was crafted with precision, formed to serve as a guardian of divine will, a leader among angels, and a reflection of God's magnificence. His presence was dazzling, his voice like the sweetest melody, and his wisdom deep as the mysteries of the heavens. In the book of Ezekiel, a passage often believed to describe Lucifer's original state provides a breathtaking image of his former glory. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you: carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald, topaz, onyx, and jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. Ezekiel 28, verse 12 to 13. He was no ordinary angel. He was an anointed cherub, set apart for a divine purpose, positioned in the very presence of God Himself. His duty was sacred, his role unmatched. He walked among the fiery stones, basking in the radiance of divine glory, standing in a place no created being could ever dare claim for themselves. He was majestic, a masterpiece of God's creation, an emblem of heavenly perfection. Lucifer's radiance was not just outward. It was deeply woven into his very being. He was created to be a reflection of divine light, a mirror of God's splendor, an embodiment of the celestial order. He knew the melodies of heaven, the rhythms of eternity, and the harmony of creation. He stood as a symbol of purity, of divine artistry, of limitless potential. Yet, within him, hidden beneath layers of unmatched beauty, wisdom, and power, a seed of something sinister began to take root. It is difficult to comprehend how one so close to perfection could fall so far, how one who dwelt in the very courts of heaven could become its greatest enemy. But such is the nature of pride, a force so insidious that even the most glorious of beings is not immune to its poison. It was within Lucifer's heart that this poison first began to spread, unnoticed at first, a quiet whisper in the depths of his thoughts, a subtle stirring of dissatisfaction, a questioning of the order established by the very one who had given him life. This is the story of Lucifer, the brightest angel who became the adversary of all that is good. His fall was not a mere moment of rebellion, but a transformation that would shake the heavens, alter the course of creation, and ignite a war that has raged through the ages. It is a story of beauty turned to ashes, of wisdom corrupted by arrogance, of light consumed by darkness. It is a story that warns of the dangers of pride, the consequences of defying the Almighty, and the inevitable downfall of those who seek to exalt themselves above their Creator. For even the brightest of stars can fall. Even the most glorious can be cast down. And in the end, no one, no matter how powerful, no matter how exalted, can stand against the sovereignty of God. The morning star, Lucifer's radiant beginning. Before darkness tainted his soul, before rebellion twisted his purpose, Lucifer was the very essence of divine craftsmanship. He was not merely another angel among the countless multitudes of heaven. He was unique, set apart, a being of incomparable splendor. Among the celestial hosts, He stood as the morning star, a title that reflected his brilliance, his prominence, and his proximity to the divine. Lucifer's creation was not an accident, nor was it without purpose. The scriptures reveal that all things were made by God and for God. Every being, every creature, every heavenly body was designed with intention, and Lucifer was no exception. He was fashioned with the utmost care, adorned with beauty that surpassed all others, and placed in a position of authority among the angelic ranks. His very name, meaning light bringer, spoke of his role as one who carried the radiance of heaven, one who reflected the splendor of the Almighty. The prophet Ezekiel provides a glimpse into this magnificence. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till wickedness was found in you. Ezekiel 28, verse 15. These words reveal a profound truth. Lucifer was created without flaw, perfect in every way. There was no trace of evil in him, no hint of rebellion, no shadow of corruption. He was the pinnacle of created glory, a being whose radiance echoed the very light of God himself. His wisdom was unmatched, his knowledge deep, his understanding vast. He possessed an intellect that far exceeded human comprehension, a mind capable of grasping the mysteries of the cosmos, the designs of divine order, and the harmony of celestial existence. His voice was like a chorus of the heavens, a melody that resonated through the expanse of eternity. If there was a being who embodied the wonder of God's creative power, it was him. Beyond his beauty and wisdom, Lucifer was given authority. He was not a mere spectator in the heavenly realm. He held a position of great influence. He was entrusted with responsibilities that placed him among the highest ranks of the angelic hierarchy. Some biblical interpretations suggest he was a guardian of divine presence, one who stood close to the throne of God, reflecting his light and leading worship in the courts of heaven. Others see him as a leader among the cherubim, overseeing the order and function of angelic hosts. Regardless of the specific details, one truth remains. He was powerful, exalted, and esteemed among the heavenly beings. But power, beauty, and wisdom, when separated from humility, can become dangerous. In Lucifer's case, the very gifts that once made him magnificent would soon become the very things that led to his ruin. The first sin, when pride was born. Lucifer's glory was undeniable. He stood as a masterpiece of divine craftsmanship, a being of unparalleled radiance and wisdom. Yet, for all his beauty and brilliance, something dark began to take root in his heart, something subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but growing with each passing moment. Pride. It is the seed from which all sin grows, the silent whisper that turns admiration into self-exaltation. Lucifer, who had once reflected the glory of God, began to turn his gaze inward. He no longer saw himself as merely a servant of the Almighty, but as something greater, something deserving of more. He saw his own beauty, his own power, his own position in heaven, and he began to believe that he was entitled to something beyond what was given to him. The book of Isaiah captures this dangerous transformation within Lucifer's heart. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the Mount of Assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Isaiah 14, verse 13 to 14. This passage reveals the essence of Lucifer's sin, not merely a desire for greatness, but a desire to be like God himself. He was not content with his exalted position. He wanted more. He longed for the throne, for dominion, for a kingdom where he was the highest authority. He who had been created to reflect God's light now sought to become the source of that light. It is crucial to understand that Lucifer's pride did not manifest in an instant. It was a gradual corruption, a slow drift from admiration to arrogance. He likely continued in his role for a time, still leading the heavenly hosts, still standing in the presence of God, but inwardly his thoughts were changing. He began to see himself not as a servant, but as a rival, not as a creation, but as a being worthy of worship. Perhaps he questioned why God alone should rule. Perhaps he believed that the order of heaven could be improved under his leadership. Perhaps he whispered to himself that he was not just a reflection of divine glory, but divine in his own right. These thoughts, these silent desires, became the foundation of his rebellion. But pride is never content to remain hidden. It seeks expression, it demands action, it longs for validation. And so, Lucifer's heart turned from secret ambition to open defiance. He would no longer merely dream of ascension, he would seize it. The rebellion in heaven, a war among angels. Pride, once fully grown, demands action. What began as a whisper in Lucifer's heart soon became a consuming fire, an ambition that could not be restrained. No longer satisfied with merely existing as the most exalted of angels, he craved more power, authority, and ultimately, the throne of God himself. But such a desire could not be pursued alone. If he was to challenge the Almighty, he would need followers, those who would stand with him in defiance. Heaven was a place of perfect order, a realm where each being had a purpose, a role assigned by the Creator. But Lucifer, in his growing arrogance, saw himself not as a servant of divine order, but as one capable of reshaping it. And so, he began to sow discord. Lucifer was not merely beautiful, he was persuasive. His voice, once used to lead worship in the courts of heaven, now became the instrument of seduction. He spoke to the angels, planting seeds of doubt, raising questions they had never considered before. Why should we serve when we can rule? Why should we bow when we are powerful? Are we not glorious? Are we not divine? With every whispered word, with every subtle suggestion, he twisted the minds of those who listened. He did not need to force them. He only needed to awaken in them the same pride that had taken root in himself. And slowly, one by one, some of the angels began to waver. They too had been created with strength, with brilliance, with purpose. They too had once accepted their place without question. But now, under Lucifer's influence, they began to see themselves in a different light. How many joined him? The book of Revelation gives a haunting clue. His tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. Revelation 12 verse 4. If this passage indeed refers to the fallen angels, then Lucifer's rebellion was not a small uprising, it was a massive defection. A third of heaven's angels, deceived and emboldened by his words, chose to stand with him. They believed his cause, his vision of a new order where they would no longer be servants but sovereigns. They stood on the precipice of war, convinced that victory was within their grasp. But Lucifer had made a grave miscalculation. For all his wisdom, for all his cunning, he had forgotten one unshakable truth: no created being can overthrow the Creator. No force in heaven, no army, no rebellion. Nothing could stand against the one who spoke existence into being. And so, the moment Lucifer raised his hand in defiance, the battle was already lost. The war in heaven was not a battle of equals. It was not a prolonged struggle where victory hung in the balance. It was the inevitable crushing of rebellion beneath the weight of divine justice. The book of Revelation describes the scene. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. Revelation 12 verse 7 to 8. Michael, the archangel, led the armies of God against Lucifer and his followers. The clash was fierce. the heavens shaken by the conflict, but there was never any doubt about the outcome. The power of God's kingdom was beyond anything the rebels could withstand. One by one, they fell, their strength failing, their cause collapsing, and then, with divine authority, the decree was given: Lucifer and his followers would be cast out, banished from the presence of God, stripped of their place in heaven. He who had once been the morning star, who had walked among the fiery stones, who had stood in the presence of divine glory, now found himself cast down, exiled, and condemned. Cast down like lightning, Lucifer's banishment. The war in heaven had reached its inevitable conclusion. Lucifer and his followers, once radiant beings of divine splendor, were no longer welcome in the presence of God. Their rebellion had not only failed, but had sealed their fate for eternity. And then, with the full weight of divine justice, the moment of their expulsion arrived. Jesus himself would later describe this event in a single striking statement: "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." Luke 10, verse 18. Lightning, sudden, blinding, violent. There was no slow descent, no negotiation, no chance for redemption. The judgment was immediate, the sentence final. In one divine decree, Lucifer, once the morning star, became the prince of darkness. His followers, once servants of light, became demons, stripped of their former glory, bound to the fate of their leader. Imagine the moment. Heaven, once filled with their presence, now shone without them. The radiance they once carried was extinguished, the melodies they once sang replaced by silence. The celestial order was restored, unshaken by their departure. And they, those who had believed they could claim the throne of the Almighty, were hurled down, cast into a realm far beneath the splendor they had known. Where did they go? Some were imprisoned immediately. The book of 2 Peter describes certain fallen angels as being held in chains, awaiting their final judgment. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. 2 Peter 2, verse 4. Others, including Lucifer, were cast down to the earth, free to roam, to scheme, to spread their corruption. Though banished from heaven, their war against God was far from over. They would now turn their attention to a new battleground, a world yet untouched by sin, a creation still in harmony with its maker. And so, Lucifer, now called Satan, the adversary, the accuser, rose from the ashes of his defeat, not as a repentant soul, but as an enemy bent on destruction. He had lost heaven, but he was not yet finished. If he could not overthrow God, he would strike at what God loved most. The birth of Satan, from angel to adversary. Lucifer had fallen. No longer was he the bearer of light, the radiant morning star, the anointed cherub who once walked in the presence of God. Stripped of his position, severed from divine favor, he became something else entirely, something dark, corrupted, and filled with an unquenchable hatred. The name that once spoke of brilliance was no longer his. Now he bore a new name, one that would echo through history as the embodiment of evil: Satan, the adversary. The transformation was complete, not just in name, but in nature. The heart that once knew the beauty of heaven now pulsed with bitterness and wrath. His mind, once filled with wisdom, now schemed only destruction. He had desired to be like God, to rule in his place, but instead, he had become the very opposite, being consumed by rebellion, a force of opposition against everything holy and good. It is important to understand that Satan's hatred is not mindless rage. It is calculated vengeance. He does not strike without purpose. He is methodical, strategic, and relentless in his mission. Though he could no longer challenge God directly, he sought to undermine his creation, to turn the beauty of what God had made into chaos, to twist what was pure into corruption. If he could not sit upon the throne of heaven, he would do everything in his power to steal, kill, and destroy. John 10 verse 10. His first target, the crown of God's creation, humanity. The world was still untainted then. The first man and woman, Adam and Eve, walked in perfect harmony with their Creator. They lived in the paradise of Eden, a garden untouched by death or sin. It was a place where God's presence was near, where innocence was unbroken, where everything was as it was meant to be. And Satan despised it. His own fall had come through pride, through the desire to rise above his place. Now, he would use the same temptation against those whom God had created in his image. If he could not have the throne, he would at least ensure that humanity fell from their place of communion with God, just as he had fallen. So he entered the garden, not with brute force, not with open defiance, but with cunning. He came as a deceiver, disguising himself in the form of a serpent, slipping into paradise with a single insidious goal: to lead mankind down the same path that had led to his own destruction. He approached Eve, the first woman, with a question that would change the course of history. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? Genesis 3 verse 1. It was a subtle twisting of truth, a deliberate distortion meant to plant doubt in her mind. Satan did not force her, did not openly defy God's command. Instead, he lured her with the same temptation that had consumed him, the desire for more. "You will not certainly die," the serpent said. "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Genesis 3 verse 4 to 5. There it was. The very sin that had led to his downfall, the hunger to be like God, was now whispered into the ears of humanity. And in that moment, Eve, and then Adam, took the bait. They reached for what was forbidden, desiring to elevate themselves, to grasp something beyond what had been given to them. The consequences were immediate. Innocence was shattered. Shame entered the world. Sin and death, which had never existed before, now took root in the heart of mankind. What Lucifer had failed to do in heaven, overthrowing God, he had now done on earth. He had turned God's most beloved creation against him. The kingdom of shadows, Satan's dominion on earth. The moment Adam and Eve took that fatal step, the world changed. What was once a realm of purity, untouched by corruption, now bore the stain of sin. The perfect communion between God and humanity was severed, and in that rupture, Satan found his dominion. No longer just an outcast from heaven, he became the ruler of a fallen world, a kingdom of shadows built upon deception, temptation, and destruction. He had lost heaven, but he had gained influence over the earth. And he would wield that influence with precision. The scriptures confirm his new title. The whole world is under the control of the evil one. 1 John 5 verse 19. The God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers, so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ. 2 Corinthians 4 verse 4. This was his strategy: to blind, to deceive, to twist truth into lies. He could not create, but he could corrupt. He could not give life, but he could bring death. His dominion would not be one of open rule, sitting upon an earthly throne for all to see. No, his reign would be more insidious, hidden in the shadows, shaping the hearts and minds of those who unknowingly walked in his grasp. Throughout history, his influence became evident. From the first murder, when Cain killed Abel in jealousy, to the great empires that rose in rebellion against God, Satan's fingerprints were everywhere. He worked through kings, through cultures, through ideologies that sought to elevate man above his Creator. Every false god, every perversion of truth, every act of cruelty and oppression, his influence was there, whispering, deceiving, pulling humanity further into darkness. But deception was not his only weapon. He was also the great accuser. The book of Job offers a rare glimpse into his tactics. Then Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." Job 1 verse 9 to 11. Here, Satan does not tempt, he accuses. He stands before God, challenging the faithfulness of mankind, seeking permission to test, to break, to destroy. His goal is not merely to lead humanity into sin, but to strip them of hope, to make them curse the very God who created them. His dominion extends beyond mere deception. It is psychological, spiritual, and relentless. He tempts, then condemns. He lures men into sin, then stands as their accuser before God. He entices with promises of power, pleasure, and freedom, only to ensnare, enslave, and destroy. This was the kingdom he had built, a world where men bowed not to him directly, but to the desires he placed before them. A world where truth was obscured, where righteousness was mocked, where holiness was replaced with self-indulgence, and yet, through it all, he knew one thing: his time was limited. The eternal struggle, Satan versus God's plan. Satan had won a battle in Eden, but the war was far from over. Though he had seized dominion over a fallen world, there was one reality he could not escape: God's plan had not been thwarted. From the moment sin entered the world, God set into motion a plan of redemption, a divine strategy that would undo everything Satan had accomplished. And Satan knew it from the very beginning. God had declared his fate. In the Garden of Eden, after Adam and Eve had fallen, God issued a prophecy that would echo through time, a promise of redemption that spelled Satan's ultimate doom. "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." Genesis 3 verse 15. It was the first prophecy of the Messiah, the one who would come to destroy the works of the devil. Though Satan would wound him, would strike his heel, the Messiah would ultimately crush his head. It was a death sentence, a declaration that no matter how much power Satan wielded, his end was certain. From that moment forward, Satan's war against humanity took on a new focus: to stop the fulfillment of God's plan. He knew that if he could prevent the coming of the promised Savior, if he could corrupt the lineage, destroy God's people, or turn humanity so far from their Creator that redemption became impossible, he might yet escape his fate. And so, he waged war against the unfolding of history itself. He worked through Pharaoh, who ordered the deaths of Hebrew infants in an attempt to weaken God's chosen people. Exodus 1 verse 22. He influenced kings and nations to rise against Israel, seeking to erase the people through whom the Messiah would come. He led Israel into idolatry, tempting them to turn from God, hoping they would fall beyond redemption. When the time finally came for the Messiah to be born, Satan again sought to destroy him before his mission could begin. He moved through Herod, who slaughtered innocent children in an attempt to kill the newborn king. Matthew 2 verse 16. When Jesus grew and began his ministry, Satan confronted him directly, offering him all the kingdoms of the world in exchange for worship. Matthew 4 verse 8 to 9. If he could corrupt the Messiah as he had corrupted humanity, the victory would be his. But Jesus did not fall. Every temptation failed. Every scheme collapsed. Every attempt to stop God's plan crumbled in the presence of the Son of God, and then came the cross. In what Satan believed to be his greatest triumph, he orchestrated the betrayal, trial, and crucifixion of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, nailed to a cross, mocked, bleeding, dying, Satan thought he had finally won. If the Messiah was dead, the promise of Genesis 3 verse 15 could never be fulfilled. But he had miscalculated. The very act that Satan believed to be his victory was, in truth, his greatest defeat. For in his death, Christ bore the weight of sin, paying the price for all humanity. And 3 days later, he rose. It was the moment that shattered the power of death, the moment that sealed Satan's fate forever. As Paul later wrote, having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Colossians 2 verse 15. Satan had lost, yet, though his defeat was certain, his war continued. Knowing he could not stop God's plan, he turned his efforts toward delaying the inevitable, seeking to drag as many souls as possible into destruction with him. He became the roaring lion, prowling the earth, seeking whom he may devour. 1 Peter 5 verse 8. He became the deceiver, the corrupter, the enemy of truth. The final defeat, Satan's fate in the end times. Satan's war against God has raged for millennia, but from the very beginning, his end has been certain. Though he still prowls the earth, deceiving, corrupting, and leading souls astray, he is not an eternal ruler. His dominion is temporary, his power is limited, and his final judgment is already written. The Bible speaks clearly about what awaits him. As time marches toward its ordained conclusion, Satan's influence will only grow more desperate. Revelation describes a time of great tribulation, when the enemy will unleash his fury like never before, knowing that his time is short. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short. Revelation 12 verse 12. He will deceive nations, lead the world into chaos, and empower the final rebellion against God. But even in this, he is not in control. His actions only serve to fulfill what has already been decreed. The last great battle will come, a moment when Satan will gather the forces of darkness for one final attempt to overthrow God's kingdom. Revelation 20 describes this climactic event, known as the Battle of Armageddon. The armies of the world, deceived by Satan, will rise against the Lord, but the battle will not last long. It will not be a struggle between equals. Just as in heaven long ago, Satan will stand against the Almighty and be utterly crushed. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Revelation 20 verse 10. This is his fate, eternal punishment, absolute defeat, complete and final separation from the presence of God. No more deception, no more rebellion, no more war. His dominion will be erased, his influence shattered, his name a memory of ruin, and in that moment, all things will be restored. The world, once tainted by his corruption, will be made new. Sin and death, the weapons he wielded against humanity, will be no more. Every tear will be wiped away, and those who remain faithful to God will reign with him in a kingdom where Satan's presence will never again be known. This is the destiny of the fallen morning star. He who once walked among the fiery stones of heaven, who once stood in the presence of divine glory, who once shone brighter than all the angels, will be cast into utter darkness. He who sought to rise above God will be brought lower than all creation. He who deceived the nations will himself be condemned by his own lies. His fall was great. His rebellion was vast. His corruption was deep. But his defeat is final, and in the end, only one truth remains. God is victorious. The story of Lucifer's fall is a warning, a reminder of the power of pride, deception, and rebellion against God. But even more than that, it is a testimony to God's ultimate victory. No matter how fierce the enemy's attacks may be, No matter how dark the world may seem, Satan's fate is sealed, his power is temporary, and his end is certain. God has given us the truth, the light that overcomes all darkness. Through Jesus Christ, we have the promise of salvation, the assurance of victory, and the hope of eternal life. We are not alone in this battle. We are not helpless against the enemy's schemes. When we stand firm in faith, when we walk in obedience to God, Satan has no hold over us. So today, make the choice to live in the truth. Stand against the lies of the enemy. Walk in the light of Christ. And if this message has touched your heart, if you believe in God's power over all things, take a moment to declare your faith. Type Amen in the comments to stand with Christ and walk in His truth. If you found this video inspiring, like it, share it with those who may need encouragement, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful messages of faith. Together, let us spread the truth and bring hope to those who need it most. God bless you.